developed countries should be more responsible in combating climate change than developing countries for three main reasons. To begin with, developed countries have the greatest capacity to combat climate change. In terms of finance, developed countries have the finance available to fund these activities, not only funding the research into the solutions, but also the financial resources to put them into action all around the world. According to OECD in 2019, climate finance provided and mobilized by developed countries reached $71.2 billion in 2017, up from $58.6 billion in 2016, accounts for 21% increase. So look at the slide and you can see that public climate finance from developed to developing countries increased from $37.9 billion in 2013 to $54.5 billion. For both aggregates, this corresponds to a 44% of increase. Moreover, in terms of education, most of citizens in developed countries have good education background knowledge. They have already known about the negative impacts of climate change and the importance of combating it. According to United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, the percentage of climate change education approaches by regions has obviously different in 2019. The Europe and North American, which contain the developed countries such as Canada, the US, and so on, have the highest percentage in all elements of climate change education. To be more specific, 8% of education in totally 17%, 6% of training in totally 15%, 25% of public awareness in totally 47%, and the last one, 5% of public access to information in total 8%. Moreover, a large number of citizens in developing countries with bad education background knowledge may have no idea about the climate change and its impact. Look at the above chart, and it can be immediately obvious that the regions such as African or Latin American and Caribbean, where have a numerous of less developed countries, have low percentage in all of the elements. The second argument is developed countries have a duty to lead by example. Developed nations are the most powerful in the international communities. Their policy can affect other developing countries. Even if India and China are rapidly rising, the developed countries between them are still the most powerful economies. If developing nations perceive that more developed ones are not acting to combat climate change, they will have no imperative to act. This is because some developing countries such as China or India want to maximize their development capacity in order to compete with developed countries. So they are only likely to cut carbon emissions if those developed nations they compete with do so first. And according to Mr. Pachauri, chair of the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, said that US is responsible to lead in fighting global warming. It's essential for the US to take action. The rest of the world looks to the US for leadership. In addition, technical progress is also a prominent reason that should be concerned because developing states living in subsistence lower green obligation, developing countries employ almost all of their resources on subsistence living, while developed countries spend much of their resources on luxury or accesses. In this case, developing nations cannot be expected to contribute equally to fighting global climate change. Moreover, developed countries respond to commit green technologies, and developed states have more applicable technology and know-how for the fight on global warming. They are uniquely responsible to commit resources toward the fight on global warming. They are also responsible to transfer them to developing countries, which cannot effectively fight the global warming without these technologies first. Therefore, the developed countries have to guide the developing countries how to develop a green economy and how to contrast a waste treatment system in factories. The last argument of our group is the developed world is mostly to blame for climate change. The first point related to historical responsibility of developed countries. So you can see on the screen that according to Adam in 2009, From 1900 and 2004, the United States produced 314,772 million metric tons of carbon dioxide compared to China 89,243 million metric tons. And as carbon dioxide can remain in the atmosphere for a long time, about 50% will be removed within 30 years, but 20% or more may remain for thousands of years. The history of emissions is as relevant as current emissions. Third, since they contribute more of the damage, and since each nation have a responsibility for their harm, developed nations have an increased obligation to combat climate change. The last point in this part is developed countries create the biggest emitters per capita. The biggest emitters per capita will have the most impact when they reduce emissions. Developed countries emit the most greenhouse gases per capita. In 2008, the United States emits 17.9 tons compared to China's 5.3 tons per person, according to the World Bank in 2010. And therefore, the reduction from these nations is both easily and has a greater impact than from developing countries. There is a difference between the emission of developing countries, which are survival emissions, and those of developed countries, which are the nature of lifestyle emissions. So they don't belong to the same category and cannot be treated as a pair. Therefore, countries with high carbon dioxide emission can reduce the emission through lifestyle changes that don't reduce citizens' quality of life. For example, simply by reducing the amount of they drive, walking, or going by bike, when only going by short distance. So that brings us to the end of our three main arguments today. Thank you for your listening.